You wake up in the middle of the night with an emptiness in your chest that feels endless. You look around, and even surrounded by people, the loneliness tightens. You tried everything, filled your schedule, forced yourself to go out, pretended to be fine, but nothing really worked. Buddhism teaches something radical about this. Loneliness and depression are not signs that you are weak or that something is wrong with you. They are messengers trying to show you something deep about how you are living. Buddhist monks discovered over 2,500 years ago that when you stop running from these feelings and learn to relate to them differently, everything changes. There are 12 simple and practical Buddhist remedies that transform the way you experience loneliness. They are not quick tricks or empty positive thinking. They are practices that reconnect you with yourself in a way you never imagined possible. The third remedy will show you why you feel so lonely even when you are with others. The 8th will reveal how your mind creates its own prison of depression, and the 12th will completely change your relationship with silence and inner stillness. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment what part of the world you are watching from, get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. There is a particular kind of pain that wraps itself around the human heart like morning fog around a mountain. It is the pain of loneliness, of feeling separate and isolated even in a crowded room. It is the heaviness of depression, that grey weight that makes even simple tasks feel insurmountable. If you have felt this pain, if you are feeling it right now in this very moment, know that you are not alone in your aloneness. Know that across centuries, Buddhist masters have walked through this same fog and emerged with wisdom that can light your way. Tonight, we embark on a journey together through 12 sacred remedies that come from the heart of Buddhist wisdom. These are not quick fixes or temporary band-aids. These are profound practices that address the root causes of loneliness and depression, practices that have transformed countless lives across millennia. You don't need to be a Buddhist to benefit from these teachings. You don't need any special knowledge or background. You simply need an open heart and a willingness to see your suffering through new eyes. In a monastery high in the mountains of Tibet, there once lived a monk who spent 3 years in silent retreat. When he emerged, villagers asked him what he had learned in all that solitude. They expected tales of mystical visions or supernatural experiences. Instead, he smiled gently and said something that puzzled them. He said, "I learned that I was never alone, not even for a single moment. I learned that loneliness is not the absence of others, but the forgetting of our true nature. And I learned that depression is not darkness, but light that has forgotten how to see itself." This monk's words point to something profound that we will explore together. Loneliness and depression are not problems to be fixed, but invitations to remember something essential about who and what you truly are. They are not enemies to be defeated, but teachers offering difficult but necessary lessons. As we move through these 12 remedies, you will begin to understand what the monk discovered in his 3 years of silence. You will begin to see your pain not as a curse, but as a doorway. The first remedy is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all. It is this: sit with your loneliness instead of running from it. In our modern world, we have become masters of distraction. When loneliness arises, we immediately reach for our phones, turn on the television, fill our calendars with activities, anything to avoid feeling what we are feeling. But the Buddhist path teaches something radically different. It teaches that the way through pain is through pain, not around it. There is a beautiful story from ancient China about a young monk who went to his master in tears. "Master," he said, "I am so lonely. I feel like I'm drowning in this emptiness. Please tell me how to make it go away." The master looked at him with infinite compassion and said, "My dear student, you are trying to escape from a room that has no walls. Tell me, what is this loneliness made of?" The young monk thought for a moment. "It is made of sadness, of a feeling that I am separate, that no one understands me." The master nodded. "And if you sit very still and look directly at this sadness, what do you find?" The young monk had never been asked to actually look at his loneliness before. He had always been so busy trying to escape it. That evening, he went to the meditation hall and did something he had never done. He invited his loneliness to sit with him. He stopped running. He stopped distracting himself. He simply sat and felt what he was feeling. At first, the loneliness seemed to intensify. It felt like it would swallow him whole. But he remembered his master's words and kept sitting, kept feeling, kept looking directly at the experience. Something extraordinary began to happen. As he stopped resisting the loneliness, it began to reveal its true nature. He noticed that loneliness was not a solid thing, but a flowing river of sensations and thoughts. There was a tightness in his chest, a heaviness in his belly, thoughts that said, "I am alone and no one cares." But as he watched these sensations and thoughts without trying to change them, they began to shift and transform. The tightness would intensify and then release. The thoughts would arise and then pass away like clouds moving across the sky. He realized that loneliness was not a permanent state, but a temporary experience, like weather passing through the vast sky of his awareness. This is the profound gift of the first remedy. When you stop running from your loneliness and depression, when you actually turn toward them with curiosity and compassion, they lose their power to control you. You discover that you are not your loneliness. You are the awareness in which loneliness appears. You are not your depression. You are the vast space in which depressive thoughts and feelings arise and pass away. This distinction changes everything. Feel what it would be like to try this practice right now. If you are feeling lonely or depressed in this moment, what would happen if instead of pushing the feeling away or judging yourself for having it, you simply acknowledged it? What if you could say to yourself, "Loneliness is here right now. Depression is present in this moment." Not with resignation, but with gentle curiosity. What if you could feel the physical sensations in your body where loneliness lives? Maybe it is a hollowness in your chest or a heaviness in your shoulders. Maybe it is a lump in your throat or a knot in your stomach. The Buddha taught that all suffering comes from resistance to what is. When we resist our loneliness, we create a secondary layer of suffering on top of the original pain. The loneliness itself is painful enough, but then we add judgments. I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? Other people don't struggle like this. I'm broken. These judgments create more suffering than the original loneliness. But when we can simply be with loneliness, without the added layer of resistance and judgment, something miraculous happens. The suffering begins to transform. This doesn't mean the loneliness immediately disappears. It means your relationship to it changes. You stop being the victim of your loneliness and become the compassionate witness of it. You stop identifying as a lonely person and recognize yourself as awareness itself, temporarily experiencing the phenomenon of loneliness. This shift in perspective is the beginning of true freedom. The second remedy builds naturally from the first. Once you have learned to sit with your loneliness, the next step is to meet it with loving kindness. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a practice called metta, which is often translated as loving kindness or boundless friendship. This practice involves directing feelings of warmth, care, and goodwill toward yourself and others. When you are lonely or depressed, metta becomes a revolutionary act of self-compassion. In a small village in ancient India, there was a woman who suffered from such severe loneliness that she could barely leave her house. The pain of feeling separate from others was so intense that she withdrew further and further into isolation. One day, a wandering teacher came to her village. Desperate for help, she approached him and poured out her story. "I am so alone," she wept. "No one loves me. I am unworthy of connection." The teacher listened with infinite patience. When she finished, he said something that surprised her. "You are suffering from a severe case of self-hatred. Your loneliness is not the absence of others' love, it is the absence of your own love for yourself." The woman protested. "But how can I love myself when I am so flawed, so broken, so isolated?" The teacher smiled gently. "That is exactly when you need love the most. Would you withhold water from a plant because it is wilting? Would you refuse medicine to someone because they are sick? You are offering yourself the opposite of what you need. You are punishing yourself with more rejection precisely when you need acceptance." He taught her a simple practice. Every morning upon waking and every evening before sleep, she was to place her hand on her heart and speak words of kindness to herself. "May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. May I be filled with loving kindness." At first, the words felt hollow, even dishonest. How could she wish herself happiness when she felt so miserable? But the teacher encouraged her to continue, to say the words even if she didn't believe them yet. Gradually, something began to shift. The woman noticed that the harsh voice of self-criticism that had been her constant companion began to soften. Where there had been judgment, small shoots of compassion began to grow. She realized that she had been treating herself like an enemy and that this inner warfare was intensifying her sense of isolation. When you are at war with yourself, you are always alone, always under attack. But when you begin to befriend yourself, to meet your pain with kindness rather than criticism, a profound healing becomes possible. This is what the practice of metta offers to those struggling with loneliness and depression. It teaches you to become your own best friend, your own source of comfort and care. This doesn't mean you stop needing others or that connection with other people becomes unimportant. It means you stop placing the entire burden of your well-being on external circumstances. You begin to cultivate an inner refuge, a place of warmth and acceptance that is always available regardless of whether anyone else is present. Try this practice now, even if it feels awkward or uncomfortable. Place your hand on your heart and feel the warmth of your own touch. Notice that your body responds to kindness, that even this simple gesture of self-care registers in your nervous system. Now speak these words, either aloud or silently, in your mind. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. Don't worry if you don't fully believe the words yet. You are planting seeds of self-compassion that will grow with repeated practice. Notice what happens in your body as you offer yourself these words of care. Does something soften? Does the grip of loneliness loosen even slightly? You might find resistance arising. A voice might say, "This is stupid. This won't help. I don't deserve kindness." Or if this happens, see if you can meet even this resistance with compassion. Resistance is here. That's okay. Even this is welcome. The third remedy is to understand and work with the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. One of the core truths that the Buddha taught is that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. This includes your loneliness and depression, even though these feelings might seem permanent. Even though depression might tell you that you will feel this way forever, the truth is that all emotional states are temporary. They arise, they remain for a time, and they pass away. This is the nature of all experience. There is a teaching story about a mighty king who asked his advisors to bring him something that would make him happy when he was sad and humble when he was proud. They searched the kingdom for months and finally brought him a simple ring. Inscribed on the ring were 4 words, "This too shall pass." The king wore the ring for the rest of his life, and it served him well in both difficult and fortunate times. When he was overwhelmed by sorrow, the ring reminded him that the sorrow would pass. When he was intoxicated by success, the ring reminded him that the success would also pass. When you are in the grip of loneliness or depression, the feeling seems eternal. Depression especially has a way of colonizing the past and the future, convincing you that you have always felt this way and will always feel this way. But this is an illusion created by the depressed state itself. If you look closely at your actual experience, you will notice that even depression is not constant. There are moments, however brief, when the heaviness lifts slightly. There are instances when a ray of light breaks through the clouds. The practice here is to begin noticing the impermanent nature of your emotional states. You might keep a simple journal where you check in with yourself several times a day and rate the intensity of your loneliness or depression on a scale of 1 to 10. What you will discover over time is that the intensity fluctuates. It is not a flat line of constant suffering. There are peaks and valleys, moments when the pain is more intense and moments when it eases. This recognition is profoundly liberating because it breaks the spell of permanence that depression casts. Furthermore, understanding impermanence helps you hold your pain more lightly. When you know that this feeling will pass, you don't grip it so tightly with fear and resistance. You can say to yourself, "I am experiencing loneliness in this moment, and like all moments, this one will pass. I am experiencing depression right now, and like all states, this too will change." This doesn't diminish the reality of your pain, but it prevents you from adding the extra suffering of believing the pain will last forever. Consider a sky filled with dark storm clouds. The clouds might be thick and heavy, blocking all sunlight. But you know, because you have lived through many storms, that eventually the clouds will move and shift. The sky itself is never damaged by the clouds. It remains vast and clear, simply allowing weather patterns to move through it. Your awareness is like this sky. The clouds of loneliness and depression are real, but they are not permanent, and they do not define the essential nature of the sky. The fourth remedy is to practice mindful breathing as an anchor in difficult moments. In Buddhist meditation, the breath is often used as a primary object of attention because it is always available, always present, and intimately connected to both body and mind. When loneliness or depression becomes overwhelming, your breath can serve as a lifeline, a way of returning to the present moment and finding finding a measure of stability amidst the emotional storm. There was once a sailor who survived a terrible shipwreck. He found himself alone in the vast ocean, clinging to a piece of driftwood. The waves were enormous, and he was certain he would drown. In his panic, he flailed and fought against the water, which only exhausted him and made his situation worse. Then he remembered something his grandfather, an old sailor, had once told him. If you're ever lost at sea, stop fighting. Find something to hold on to and focus on your breath. Let the ocean do what it will do, but you stay with your breathing. One breath at a time will carry you through. The sailor stopped fighting. He wrapped his arms around the driftwood and began to breathe slowly and deliberately, in through the nose, out through the mouth. One breath, then another, then another. The waves still crashed around him. The situation was still dire, but he was no longer adding his panic to the danger. He was present with what was, breathing through it, surviving it one moment at a time. Eventually, he was rescued, and he attributed his survival not to physical strength, but to the simple practice of staying with his breath. When you are overwhelmed by loneliness or sinking into depression, your breath offers the same kind of anchor. These emotional states often involve a cascade of painful thoughts, worst-case scenarios, and catastrophic predictions about the future. The mind spins in circles of worry and rumination, but the breath only exists in the present moment. You cannot breathe in the past or the future. Every breath happens now. So when you bring your attention to your breathing, you are automatically bringing yourself back to the only moment in which you have any real power, which is this present moment. The practice is beautifully simple. When you notice that you are caught in loneliness or depression, pause whatever you are doing and bring your attention to your breath. You don't need to change your breathing or make it deeper or slower. You simply notice it as it is. Feel the sensation of air moving in through your nostrils. Notice the slight pause at the top of the inhale. Feel the air moving out through your nostrils or mouth. Notice the pause at the bottom of the exhale before the next breath begins. This is one complete breath cycle. Can you stay present for one complete cycle? Then can you stay present for another? What you will discover is that it is actually very difficult to be completely present with your breathing and simultaneously lost in depressive rumination. The two activities occupy the same mental space. When you are truly here, feeling this breath moving in and out of this body in this moment, there is no room for the mind to wander into its painful stories about the past or future. This doesn't mean the stories disappear forever. It means you have found a way to create small islands of presence in the sea of suffering. As you practice this more regularly, something else begins to happen. You start to notice that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes thoughts coming and going. You are not your depression. You are the consciousness in which depressive states arise and pass away. Your breath becomes a reminder of your true nature as awareness itself, vast and unchanging, capable of holding all experiences without being destroyed by them. The fifth remedy takes us deeper into the heart of Buddhist wisdom about the nature of self and separation. It is this: recognize that you are not as separate as you feel. The experience of loneliness is fundamentally an experience of separation, a feeling that you are cut off from others, isolated, alone in your suffering. But Buddhism teaches that this sense of separation, while it feels absolutely real, is based on a misunderstanding of reality. In truth, you are not separate at all. You are intimately connected to all of life in ways that are both obvious and subtle. In a monastery in ancient China, a young monk approached his master with a question that had been troubling him. "Master," he said, "I look at the other monks, and they all seem so content, so peaceful. But I feel so alone, even when we are all together. Why do I feel so separate from everyone?" The master picked up a cup of tea and held it up to the light. "Tell me," he said, "where did this tea come from?" The monk thought this was a strange answer to his question, but he replied, "It came from the tea plant in the garden." The master nodded. "And where did the tea plant come from?" "From a seed," the monk said, "and before that, from another tea plant." The master smiled. "Keep going. Where did that plant come from?" The monk thought deeper. "From the soil, from the rain, from the sun." "Yes," the master said. "And where did the soil come from? Where did the rain come from? Where did the sun come from?" The monk began to see where this was leading. Everything comes from everything else. The tea plant depends on the soil, which depends on organisms breaking down organic matter, which depends on other plants and animals dying, which depends on their having lived, which depends on countless conditions. The master nodded with satisfaction. "Now tell me, where does this tea plant end and everything else begin? Can you find a boundary where the tea plant is completely separate from the soil, from the rain, from the sun, from the gardener who planted it, from you who will drink it? The monk sat in silence as a profound recognition washed over him. There were no clear boundaries. Everything was interpenetrating everything else. He was not separate from the tea, from the master, from the other monks, from the air he breathed, or the earth beneath his feet. His loneliness was based on a fiction, the fiction of being a separate self cut off from the rest of existence. This teaching about interconnectedness is not merely philosophical, it is a direct antidote to loneliness. When you deeply understand that you are not separate, that your existence depends on and is interwoven with countless other existences, the feeling of isolation begins to dissolve. You start to see that every breath you take connects you to the trees that produce the oxygen. Every bite of food connects you to the farmers who grew it, the sun that nourished it, the rain that watered it, the countless beings who contributed to bringing it to your plate. Right now, as you read or hear these words, you are not alone. You are connected to the person who wrote these words, to the vast tradition of Buddhist teachers who developed these insights, to all the beings who have ever struggled with loneliness and found their way through. You are connected to every person who has ever felt what you are feeling. Your pain is not uniquely yours. It is a human pain, and in that recognition, there is strange comfort. You are part of the human family, participating in experiences that millions have participated in before you. There is a practice from the Buddhist tradition called Just Like Me that can help make this interconnectedness more tangible. When you see another person, whether in person or even just thinking about them, you can silently reflect. This person, just like me, wants to be happy. This person, just like me, wants to be free from suffering. This person, just like me, experiences loneliness and fear. This person, just like me, is doing their best to navigate life. This simple practice begins to break down the walls of separation that loneliness builds. It helps you recognize your shared humanity with all beings. When you practice this regularly, you begin to feel less isolated. You start to sense that you are part of a vast web of interconnected consciousness, all of us stumbling along together, all of us sometimes lonely, all of us sometimes afraid, all of us deserving of compassion and care. This doesn't immediately eliminate loneliness, but it transforms it from "I am alone and separate" to "I am having the universal human experience of feeling alone," which connects me to all other humans who have felt this way. The sixth remedy is to serve others, even when you don't feel like it. This might seem counterintuitive. When you are depressed or lonely, the last thing you want to do is reach out to others or engage in service. Depression tells you to withdraw, to isolate, to wait until you feel better before engaging with the world. But Buddhism teaches that service to others is not something you do after you feel better. It is one of the ways you begin to feel better. There is a teaching story about a woman who was drowning in grief after the death of her child. She went to the Buddha and begged him to bring her child back to life. The Buddha said he could help her, but first she needed to bring him a handful of mustard seeds from a household that had never experienced death. The woman went from house to house in her village asking for mustard seeds, but at every door, when she asked if anyone in that household had ever died, the answer was yes. A grandmother, a father, a baby, a sibling. Every household had experienced loss. By the time the woman returned to the Buddha, she had not found a single household untouched by death, but something in her had transformed. She realized that grief and loss were universal experiences. She was not alone in her suffering. Her pain connected her to all of humanity. The Buddha taught her that the way through her grief was not to eliminate it, but to let it open her heart to the suffering of others, to use her pain as a bridge to compassion. This is the profound gift of service. When you reach out to help another person, even in a small way, you temporarily step outside the prison of self-focused suffering. You remember that you are not the only person in pain. You discover that you have something to offer, that your presence and care matter. This is not about denying your own pain or pretending you are fine when you're not. It is about recognizing that you can be both in pain and helpful, both struggling and generous. The service doesn't need to be grand or dramatic. You don't need to volunteer at a homeless shelter or join the Peace Corps, though those are beautiful options if they call to you. Service can be as simple as truly listening to a friend who needs to talk. It can be offering a genuine smile to a stranger. It can be helping a neighbor carry groceries. It can be sending a kind message to someone who is going through a difficult time. Small acts of service create ripples of connection that ease the grip of isolation. Research in modern psychology has confirmed what Buddhist teachers have known for centuries. Helping others activates regions of the brain associated with pleasure and connection. It releases neurochemicals that improve mood. It shifts your focus from rumination to action, from self-obsession to engagement with the world. When you serve others, you are also serving yourself, though that should not be the primary motivation. The motivation should be genuine care for the well-being of others. There is a practice you can try right now, even if you are struggling. Think of one person in your life who might benefit from a kind word or gesture. Maybe it is someone who is also going through a difficult time. Maybe it is someone who has helped you in the past. It could even be someone you barely know but who crossed your mind for some reason. Can you reach out to that person today? Can you send a message, make a call, perform some small act of kindness? Notice what happens in your body and mind when you do this. Does the weight of loneliness shift, even slightly? The seventh remedy is to take refuge in the present moment. So much of depression involves dwelling in the past, ruminating on regrets, mistakes, losses, and disappointments. So much of anxiety, which often accompanies depression, involves projecting into the future, imagining all the things that could go wrong. But the present moment, this very moment right now, is usually more bearable than the stories your mind tells about the past and future. There was a Zen master who was known for his extraordinary peace and joy. Students would ask him, "Master, how do you remain so happy when there is so much suffering in the world?" He would smile and say, "I am on good terms with this moment. I am not at war with what is happening right now." They would press him, "But what about all your responsibilities? What about all the problems that need solving?" He would reply, "In this moment I am breathing. In this moment my heart is beating. In this moment I am alive. When the next moment comes, I will meet it fully, but I do not abandon this moment to worry about the next." This teaching points to something profoundly liberating. Most of our suffering happens in our minds, in our thoughts about what happened or what might happen. But if you bring your attention fully to this present moment, what do you actually find? Right now, in this instant, are you okay? Not is your life okay or is your situation okay, but in this precise moment, are you breathing? Is your heart beating? Are you aware? These simple facts of your existence in this moment can serve as a refuge when the mind is spinning stories of despair. The practice is to gently, repeatedly bring yourself back to now. When you notice that your mind has wandered into depressive thoughts about the past or anxious thoughts about the future, you can silently say to yourself, "Here, now." These two simple words serve as an anchor. A reminder that the only place you actually exist is here, and the only time you are ever alive is now. Past and future are mental constructs. Only this moment is real. In this moment, what can you notice with your senses? What do you see right now? What colors, shapes, movements? What do you hear? What sounds are present? What do you feel on your skin? Temperature, texture, air moving. What do you smell or taste? When you engage your senses fully, you automatically come into the present moment because the senses only operate in the now. This simple practice of sensory awareness can interrupt the cycle of depressive rumination and create a small space of peace. It is important to understand that taking refuge in the present moment is not about spiritual bypassing or pretending everything is fine when it's not. If you are in genuine danger, if your situation requires action, then present moment awareness helps you respond skillfully rather than react from panic. But so often, we are not in immediate danger. We are safe in this moment, but our minds are creating suffering by reliving painful pasts or imagining catastrophic futures. The eighth remedy is to understand that you are not your thoughts. This teaching is central to Buddhist psychology and offers profound relief to those struggling with depression. Depression is characterized by a particular pattern of thinking, negative thoughts about yourself, your life, and your future. These thoughts can be relentless and convincing. They sound like truth, they feel like facts. But Buddhism teaches that thoughts are simply mental events, temporary phenomena arising and passing in the space of awareness. They are not you, and they are not necessarily true. There is a story about a meditation master who was teaching a group of students about the nature of mind. She held up a clear glass of water and dropped a small amount of red dye into it. The water immediately turned red. "This is what most people think their mind is like," she said. "When a thought appears, they believe they become the thought. A sad thought appears, and they believe they are sad. An angry thought appears, and they believe they are angry." Then she took a large pitcher of clear water and dropped the same amount of red dye into it. The colour was barely visible, just a faint tint in the vast clear water. "But this is what your mind actually is like," she said. "Vast like this pitcher, so spacious that any thought or emotion that appears is just a tiny colour in a huge space. When you are depressed, it doesn't feel like thoughts are tiny colours in a vast space. It feels like you are drowning in red water. The thoughts seem to be all there is. I am worthless. Nothing will ever get better. I am alone. I can't do this." These thoughts feel like the absolute truth about reality, but they are not. They are simply thoughts, mental events that have been conditioned by past experiences, by brain chemistry, by circumstances. They arise, they persist for a time, and if you don't feed them with attention and belief, they pass away. The practice here is called cognitive diffusion in modern psychology, but it has roots in ancient Buddhist meditation practices. The idea is to create some distance between yourself and your thoughts, to observe them rather than being consumed by them. One way to practice this is to label your thoughts when they arise. Instead of thinking, "I am worthless," you notice, "I am having the thought that I am worthless." Do you see the difference? In the first version, you are identified with the thought. In the second version, you are the observer of the thought. Another technique is to imagine your thoughts as clouds passing across the sky of your awareness. You are the sky, vast and unchanging. The thoughts are the clouds, temporary weather patterns moving through. Some clouds are white and fluffy, pleasant thoughts. Some clouds are dark and heavy, difficult thoughts. But the sky is never damaged or changed by the clouds. It simply allows them to pass through. You can practice watching your thoughts like this, with a sense of spaciousness and non-attachment. A third approach is to notice the voice in your head that speaks these thoughts. Depression often comes with a very harsh, critical internal voice. This voice might say terrible things that you would never say to another person. "You're pathetic. You're a failure. You'll never get better." When you notice this voice, you can ask yourself, who is listening to this voice? Who is aware of these thoughts? The answer is always the same. You are aware. You are the awareness that observes thoughts. This awareness is prior to thoughts, deeper than thoughts, more fundamental than thoughts. You are not the harsh voice. You are the consciousness in which the harsh voice appears. As you practice observing your thoughts rather than identifying with them, something remarkable happens. The thoughts lose some of their power. They are still present, but they no longer define you. You begin to recognize that you can have depressive thoughts and not be a depressed person. You can experience thoughts of loneliness without being fundamentally alone. The thoughts are like visitors passing through the house of your consciousness. You don't have to invite them to stay for dinner. You can acknowledge them at the door and let them move along. This practice doesn't make difficult thoughts disappear immediately. That is not the goal. The goal is to change your relationship to your thoughts so that you are no longer tyrannized by them. You become the spacious awareness that can hold both difficult thoughts and peaceful thoughts, both dark clouds and light clouds, without being destroyed by any of them. The ninth remedy is to practice gratitude, even for small things. When you are depressed, your brain has a negativity bias. It notices and remembers negative experiences more readily than positive ones. This is actually an evolutionary adaptation meant to keep you safe from threats, but it can create a very distorted view of reality when you are struggling with your mental health. Gratitude practice is a way of consciously redirecting your attention to what is working, what is good, what is still beautiful in your life, even when so much feels difficult. There is a teaching story about two monks who were traveling together through a period of severe drought. They had been walking for days through dry, barren landscape, their water supplies nearly depleted. One monk complained constantly, "This is terrible. We will surely die of thirst. Why did we choose this route? Everything is dead and brown and hopeless. The other monk walked in silence. When they finally came upon a small stream of water flowing from a rock, the complaining monk said, "Look at this, just a trickle, barely enough to fill our water skins. We need a river, not this pathetic stream." The other monk knelt beside the water, cupped his hands, and drank deeply. Then he said, "Brother, I am grateful for this miracle. Water flowing from stone. Isn't that extraordinary? This small stream will sustain our lives. What more could we ask?" The complaining monk realized that they were experiencing the same situation but inhabiting completely different realities. One was focused on what was wrong and insufficient. The other was focused on what was present and miraculous. This story illustrates that gratitude is not about denying difficulty. Both monks were walking through a drought. Both were thirsty and tired, but one chose to relate to the experience through complaint and lack, while the other chose to relate to it through appreciation and sufficiency. When you are depressed, your mind naturally gravitates toward complaint and lack. Gratitude practice is a way of training your attention to also notice what is present and good. The practice is simple but powerful. Each day, ideally in the morning or evening, you take a few minutes to identify 3 things you are grateful for. These don't need to be big things. In fact, when you are depressed, it is often easier to start with very small, simple things. I am grateful for the warmth of this blanket. I am grateful that I have clean water to drink. I am grateful that my heart kept beating through the night. I'm grateful for the birds I can hear outside my window. I'm grateful that I managed to get out of bed today. At first, this practice might feel forced or even irritating. Your depressed mind might protest, "This is stupid. Listing 3 things I'm grateful for won't fix my life. I'm just putting a positive spin on a bad situation." If this happens, that's okay. You are not trying to convince yourself that everything is perfect. You are simply training your brain to notice both the difficult and the good, to create a more balanced view of reality. Neuroscience research has shown that regular gratitude practice actually rewires the brain over time. It strengthens neural pathways associated with positive emotion and well-being. It increases the production of dopamine and serotonin, neurotransmitters that are often depleted in depression. This is not magical thinking. This is working with the neuroplasticity of your brain to create new patterns of attention and perception. You might also practice spontaneous gratitude throughout the day. When you notice something pleasant, even if it's small, you can pause and consciously acknowledge it. The warmth of the sun on your face, a kind word from a friend, a good cup of coffee, a moment when your pain eased slightly. These tiny acknowledgements accumulate over time, creating a foundation of appreciation that can coexist with your struggles. The 10th remedy is to connect with nature. There is something about the natural world that has a healing effect on the human psyche. Buddhist monasteries have traditionally been built in natural settings, in forests and mountains, near rivers and lakes. This is not accidental. The ancient masters recognized that nature has a way of putting human concerns in perspective, of reminding us that we are part of something much larger than our individual dramas. There is a story about a monk who was struggling with severe depression. He had tried every meditation technique, every practice, every teaching. Nothing seemed to help. The darkness remained. Finally, his teacher told him to stop meditating and stop trying to fix himself. Instead, she instructed him to spend 1 hour each day sitting beside the river near the monastery. He was not to meditate or practice anything. He was simply to watch the river flow. The monk was skeptical but desperate enough to try anything. He went to the river and sat. At first, his mind continued its familiar patterns of rumination and despair, but gradually he began to actually see the river. He noticed how it flowed ceaselessly, never stopping, never holding on to any particular configuration of water. He saw how it moved around obstacles rather than fighting them. He observed how it was always changing and yet always the same river. After many days of this watching, something in him began to shift. The river was teaching him what all his meditation practice had not, the art of letting go, of flowing, of being himself while also being part of something eternal. When you are depressed and lonely, nature offers several gifts. First, it provides sensory richness that can bring you into the present moment. The sight of trees moving in wind, the sound of birds, the feeling of earth or grass beneath your feet. These sensory experiences anchor you in the here and now. Second, nature reminds you that you are part of something larger than your individual self. You are not separate from the natural world. You are an expression of it. The same forces that grow trees and move rivers are animating your body and mind. Third, nature operates on cycles and rhythms that put human suffering in perspective. Trees lose their leaves every autumn and grow them again every spring. This is not tragedy. This is natural rhythm. In the same way your current darkness is part of a cycle, it will not last forever. Winter always gives way to spring, though it might not feel that way when you are in the depths of winter. Fourth, nature asks nothing of you. You don't have to perform or achieve or be anything other than what you are. A forest doesn't judge you. A lake doesn't require anything from you. This unconditional presence can be profoundly healing when you feel unworthy or inadequate. The practice is to spend time in nature regularly, even if it's just a few minutes a day. If you have access to wild spaces, forests, mountains, beaches, wonderful. But even a local park, a tree-lined street or a garden will do. If you are unable to leave your home, you might sit by a window where you can see sky, clouds, birds, or plants. The key is to be present to the natural world rather than lost in your thoughts. Let yourself be touched by the aliveness around you. You might also practice what some traditions call forest bathing, or simply walking in nature with awareness. As you walk, notice everything your senses perceive. The quality of light filtering through leaves, the texture of bark on trees, the smell of earth or plants, the sound of wind or water or creatures. Let yourself be absorbed in the richness of the natural world. This is not escapism. This is remembering your place in the larger web of life. The 11th remedy is to find or create community, what Buddhists call Sangha. One of the 3 jewels in Buddhism, the 3 things that practitioners take refuge in, is Sangha, or spiritual community. Human beings are inherently social creatures. We are not designed to live in isolation, even though loneliness can make you want to withdraw and isolate. This withdrawal only intensifies the problem. Connection with others, especially others who understand what you are going through, can be profoundly healing. There is a teaching story about a teacher who was demonstrating the importance of community to her students. She held up a single stick and asked them to try to break it. They could easily snap it in half. Then she held up a bundle of sticks tied together and asked them to break the bundle. No matter how hard they tried, they could not break the bundle. This is the power of Sangha, she said. Alone, we are fragile, easily broken by the difficulties of life. But together, we become strong. We support each other. We hold each other up when one of us is weak. When you are depressed and lonely, reaching out to others can feel impossible. You might think you have nothing to offer, that you would burden others with your presence, that no one would want to spend time with you. These thoughts are symptoms of depression, not accurate reflections of reality. The truth is that connection is healing both for you and for those you connect with. When you share authentically about your struggles, you give others permission to be authentic about theirs. You create the possibility of genuine intimacy, which is the antidote to loneliness. Community can take many forms. It might be a meditation group or a Buddhist Sangha where you practice with others. It might be a therapy group or a support group for people dealing with depression or loneliness. It might be a hobby group, a book club, a volunteer organization, or a faith community. What matters is not the specific form, but the quality of connection, the sense that you belong, that you are seen, that you matter to others. If you don't currently have community in your life, building it can feel daunting. Start small. Reach out to one person. This might be an old friend you've lost touch with, a family member, or even a therapist or counselor. You might join one group, attend one meeting, show up at one gathering. You don't have to become immediately best friends with everyone. Community is built gradually through repeated small acts of showing up and connecting. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a practice called noble friendship, which refers to relationships that support your spiritual growth and well-being. These are friendships where you can be authentic, where you are encouraged toward wisdom and compassion rather than harm and delusion. When you are cultivating community, look for people who are safe, who listen without judgment, who respect your experience, who offer genuine support rather than toxic positivity or dismissal of your struggles. It is also important to recognize that you can be part of a community even when you are struggling. You don't have to wait until you are better to show up. In fact, showing up when you are struggling is often when community is most valuable. Others in the community have likely been where you are. They understand, they can offer perspective, hope, and practical support. And your presence, even in your struggle, contributes to the community. Your honesty about your difficulties helps create a culture where people can be real with each other. You might also consider online communities. If in-person connection is difficult, there are many online sanghas, support groups, and forums where people share about their experiences with loneliness and depression. While online connection is not a complete substitute for in-person relationships, it can be a valuable bridge, especially when you are feeling too depressed to leave your house. The key is to find communities that are supportive and healthy rather than those that reinforce negative patterns. The practice of community also involves showing up for others, not just receiving support, but offering it. This ties back to the remedy of service. When you listen to another person's struggles with compassion, when you offer encouragement to someone who is having a hard day, when you simply show up regularly so others know they can count on you, you are weaving the web of connection that holds everyone in the community. You are both held and holding, both supported and supporting. The 12th remedy is to accept that the path is gradual and to meet yourself with patience. This might be the most important remedy of all because it acknowledges the reality that healing from loneliness and depression is not instantaneous. You will not read this teaching and suddenly be cured. You will not practice meditation for a week and find that all your suffering has evaporated. The Buddhist path is sometimes called the gradual path because transformation happens slowly through repeated practice over time. There is a beautiful story about a young student who came to a Zen master and asked, "Master, how long will it take me to reach enlightenment?" The master replied, "Perhaps 10 years." The student said, "But what if I practice very hard, twice as much as other students?" The master said, "Then perhaps 20 years. The student was confused. "Why would it take longer if I practice harder?" The master smiled. "Because you will be so busy trying to get somewhere that you will miss the point entirely. The point is not to reach some future state of perfection. The point is to be fully present to your experience right now, exactly as it is." This teaching is crucial for working with depression and loneliness. If you approach these remedies with the attitude of, "I need to fix myself as quickly as possible, I need to get rid of these feelings, I need to become someone different," you are actually creating more suffering. You are at war with yourself as you are. You are rejecting your current experience in favor of some imagined future experience. This rejection is itself a form of violence that intensifies your pain. The alternative is to approach the path with patience and self-compassion. You acknowledge that you are struggling. You recognize that healing takes time. You commit to showing up for the practices, not because they will immediately make you feel better, but because they are wholesome and beneficial even when the results are not immediately obvious. This is what Buddhists call practice, something you do regularly regardless of the immediate outcome. Think about how a garden grows. You plant seeds, you water them, you provide sunlight, but you cannot force the seeds to sprout faster by pulling on them. You cannot make the flowers bloom by yelling at them to hurry up. Growth happens according to its own organic timeline. Your job is to create the conditions for growth and then to wait with patience and trust. The same is true for your healing. These 12 remedies create the conditions for healing, but the actual healing happens in its own time. This means you will have good days and bad days. You will have times when you feel like you are making progress and times when you feel like you are back at square one. This is completely normal. Healing is not linear. It is more like a spiral where you circle through similar territory but at different levels of understanding and integration. When you find yourself struggling again with loneliness or depression, you can meet this with patience rather than despair. You can say to yourself, "This is difficult. I have been here before, I know how to work with this. I will be patient with myself and continue practicing." Part of patience is accepting that you might need multiple forms of support. These Buddhist remedies are powerful, but they are not the only tools available. You might also need therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, medical care. There is no shame in using all available resources to support your well-being. The Buddha himself said that he taught one thing only: suffering and the end of suffering. He was pragmatic about the methods. Use what works. Combine ancient wisdom with modern medicine. Be patient with the process. Another aspect of patience is celebrating small victories. When you are depressed, your mind might dismiss any small improvement as insignificant. "Sure, I felt a little better today, but I'm still depressed, so what's the point?" But small improvements are how healing happens. If you felt a little better for a few minutes today, that is genuine progress. If you managed to practice one of these remedies, even though you didn't feel like it, that is a victory. If you reached out to one person, even though loneliness told you to isolate, that matters. You might keep a journal where you note small signs of progress, not to pressure yourself to improve faster, but to help you see the gradual changes that are happening. Over weeks and months, you will be able to look back and see how far you have come. This can provide encouragement during difficult times when it feels like nothing is changing. The practice of patience also involves being kind to yourself when you forget to practice, when you fall back into old patterns, when you feel like you are failing. These are not failures, they are part of the process. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a puppy that constantly wanders away. When you are training a puppy, you don't punish it for wandering. You gently, patiently bring it back again and again. This is how you work with your own mind. When you notice you have been caught in rumination, you gently bring yourself back to the present. When you notice you have been isolating, you gently encourage yourself to reach out. When you notice you have been harsh with yourself, you gently offer compassion. Now that we have explored all 12 remedies, let us go deeper into how these practices work together as an integrated path of healing. The remedies are not meant to be practiced in isolation from each other, but rather as complementary approaches that support and reinforce one another. When you sit with your loneliness without running from it, when you meet it with loving kindness, when you understand its impermanent nature, when you anchor yourself with breath, when you recognize your interconnection with all life, you are weaving a web of practice that becomes stronger than any single thread. In the ancient forests of India, there lived a weaver who was renowned for creating the most beautiful and durable cloth in all the land. When asked about his secret, he would say, "I use 12 different techniques in my weaving, 12 ways of interlacing the threads. Any one technique alone would create weak cloth that would tear easily. But when I use all 12 together, each one supporting the others, the cloth becomes so strong that it can withstand any stress." The Buddhist path is like this. These 12 remedies are 12 ways of interlacing practice into the fabric of your life, creating a resilience that can withstand the difficulties you face. Consider how the remedies support each other. When you practice sitting with your difficult emotions without running from them, you are strengthening your capacity to be present. This capacity helps you when you practice mindful breathing, because you are less likely to be overwhelmed by what arises when you pay attention. When you practice loving kindness toward yourself, you are creating the inner safety that makes it possible to look directly at your pain without being destroyed by it. When you understand impermanence, you are less likely to grasp desperately at pleasant states or resist unpleasant ones, which makes all the other practices flow more naturally. The practice of recognizing interconnection helps dissolve the sense of separation that fuels loneliness, which makes it easier to reach out to community. When you engage in service to others, you are embodying the interconnection that you understand conceptually. When you take refuge in the present moment, you are creating the spaciousness in which loving kindness can arise naturally. When you recognize that you are not your thoughts, you are freed from the tyranny of depressive thinking, which makes gratitude practice more accessible. See how each practice opens doorways to the others. This is the genius of the Buddhist approach. It offers not one single technique, but a comprehensive system of practices that address suffering from multiple angles simultaneously. You might find that some of these remedies resonate more strongly with you than others. That is natural and fine. You can emphasize the practices that speak most directly to your situation while still maintaining some connection to all 12. There is a teaching in Buddhism about the 3 trainings: ethical conduct, meditation, and wisdom. These 12 remedies can be understood as expressions of these 3 trainings. The practices of loving kindness, service, and community are expressions of ethical conduct, of learning to live in harmony with others and yourself. The practices of sitting with emotions, mindful breathing, taking refuge in the present moment, and recognizing you are not your thoughts are expressions of meditation, of training attention and awareness. The practices of understanding impermanence, recognizing interconnection, gratitude, connecting with nature, and patience are expressions of wisdom, of seeing reality more clearly. When you engage with all 3 trainings, you are supporting your healing at every level. Ethical conduct creates wholesome conditions in your life and relationships. Meditation strengthens your capacity for presence and awareness. Wisdom transforms your understanding of yourself and reality. Together, these 3 create a complete path of transformation. Let us explore more deeply how to integrate these practices into daily life. One approach is to create a simple morning practice that includes elements of several remedies. You might begin your day by sitting for a few minutes and connecting with your breath, bringing yourself fully into the present moment. Then, you might practice loving kindness, offering good wishes to yourself and others. Then you might reflect on 3 things you are grateful for, however small. This simple morning practice, which might take only 10 or 15 minutes, plants seeds that will influence your entire day. Throughout the day, you can practice informal mindfulness, bringing awareness to ordinary activities. When you are washing dishes, feel the warmth of the water and the texture of the dishes rather than being lost in thought. When you are walking, feel your feet making contact with the ground. When you are eating, taste your food. These simple acts of presence are profound practices. They train you to inhabit your life rather than being lost in mental abstractions about your life. When difficult emotions arise during the day, you can practice the remedy of sitting with them rather than running. This doesn't mean you stop what you are doing and sit in formal meditation every time you feel lonely or sad. It means you pause, acknowledge what you are feeling, take a few conscious breaths, and then continue with your activity while allowing the emotion to be present. You are learning to have difficult emotions without being controlled by them, to allow them to move through you like weather moving through the sky. You can also practice remembering impermanence throughout the day. When something pleasant happens, you can appreciate it while knowing it will pass. This makes you more present to the good moments rather than taking them for granted. When something unpleasant happens, you can remember that this too will pass, which helps you not get overwhelmed by temporary difficulties. This practice of remembering impermanence creates a more balanced and equanimous relationship with all of experience. In the evening, you might have a practice of reflection. You can review your day and notice where you practiced skillfully and where you got caught in old patterns. This is not about judging yourself, but about learning from your experience. Where did you remember to be present? Where did you forget? Where were you kind to yourself? Where were you harsh? This reflection helps integrate the lessons of each day and strengthens your intention to practice. You might also create regular times for community connection. Maybe once a week you attend a meditation group or meet with a friend. Maybe you volunteer regularly or participate in an online community. Having regular scheduled times for connection helps ensure that you don't become isolated even when depression makes you want to withdraw. Another approach is to have specific practices for difficult moments. When you notice you are sinking into depression, you might have a list of practices that have helped you in the past. Maybe going for a walk in nature, maybe calling a supportive friend, maybe practicing loving kindness meditation, maybe doing something kind for another person. Having a plan for difficult times makes it more likely that you will respond skillfully rather than getting lost in the depression. It can be helpful to work with a teacher or therapist who can guide you in these practices and help you navigate the difficulties that arise. While these teachings are powerful, having someone with experience to support you can make a significant difference. A good teacher can help you see blind spots, can encourage you when you want to give up, can suggest adjustments to your practice that make it more effective for your particular situation. There is also value in studying these teachings more deeply. You might read books by Buddhist teachers about working with difficult emotions. You might listen to talks or podcasts. You might attend retreats where you can practice intensively for a period of time. All of this study and practice plants seeds that mature over time. Even if you don't immediately understand or embody everything you learn, it becomes part of the soil from which your transformation grows. Remember always that the goal is not perfection but progress. You are not trying to become someone who never feels lonely or depressed. You are learning to have a different relationship with these experiences when they arise. You are developing the capacity to meet difficult emotions with wisdom and compassion rather than being overwhelmed by them. You are discovering that you are larger than any emotion, any thought, any state of mind. You are the spacious awareness in which all of these temporary phenomena arise and pass away. There is a teaching story about a monk who asked his master, "When will I be free from suffering?" The master replied, "When you stop demanding to be free from suffering, when you can be at peace whether suffering is present or absent, when you realize that you are already free and that suffering is simply a temporary visitor in the vast house of your being." The monk heard these words, but it took him many years of practice before he truly understood them. Understanding came not from intellectual analysis, but from repeated practice, from showing up day after day to sit with his experience, to meet it with kindness, to rest in awareness. This is the path being offered to you. Not a quick fix, but a comprehensive approach to transforming your relationship with loneliness and depression. Not a promise that you will never feel pain again, but a teaching that you can learn to hold your pain differently, to meet it with wisdom rather than being destroyed by it. Not a guarantee of constant happiness, but a possibility of deep peace that is not dependent on circumstances being exactly as you want them to be. Let us now explore some of the obstacles you might encounter on this path and how to work with them skillfully. The first obstacle is what Buddhism calls spiritual bypassing, which is using spiritual practices to avoid rather than address your pain. This might look like using meditation to numb out rather than to be present, or using teachings about impermanence to dismiss your suffering rather than to hold it wisely. The antidote to spiritual bypassing is honest self-inquiry. Are you using these practices to be with your experience or to escape from it? There is a story about a student who came to her teacher and said, "Master, I have been practicing meditation for a year now and I have achieved great peace. I no longer feel anything disturbing. I am beyond suffering." The teacher looked at her skeptically. "Really? Let me test this." She then said some very harsh words to the student, criticizing her practice and questioning her sincerity. Immediately, the student became angry and defensive. "How dare you speak to me this way? After all my practice?" The teacher smiled gently. "Ah, so the peace was not so deep after all. You were using meditation to suppress your emotions, not to transform your relationship with them. True peace can hold all emotions, even anger, without being shaken." This teaching points to an important distinction. These 12 remedies are not about eliminating your emotions or transcending your humanity. They are about being fully human with more wisdom and compassion. When you sit with your loneliness, you actually feel it rather than avoiding it. When you practice loving kindness, you are not trying to cover over your pain with false positivity. You are genuinely offering care to yourself in the midst of difficulty. When you understand impermanence, you are not dismissing your suffering as unimportant. You are recognizing its temporary nature while still honoring that it is painful in this moment. Another obstacle is what might be called the special person trap. This is when you believe that while these practices might work for others, they won't work for you because your situation is uniquely difficult. Your depression is different. Your loneliness is more intense. While it is true that everyone's situation is unique, the fundamental principles of how suffering works are universal. The Buddha taught that all beings experience suffering and that there is a path to transform that suffering. This includes you. The special person trap often manifests as yes, but thinking. Yes, sitting with emotions might help some people, but my emotions are too intense. Yes, loving kindness might work for others, but I have too much self-hatred. Yes, community might help, but I'm too far gone for anyone to want to connect with me. These thoughts are symptoms of depression, not accurate assessments of reality. When you notice yes, but thinking arising, you can recognize it as a form of resistance and gently return to practice. A related obstacle is impatience and the desire for quick results. You might try one of these remedies for a few days and then give up when you don't feel dramatically better. But as we discussed with the 12th remedy, transformation takes time. Most people who have healed from depression and loneliness report that the changes happened gradually over months and years, not days and weeks. There were small improvements that accumulated over time, not sudden dramatic breakthroughs. The practice here is to focus on the process rather than the outcome. Can you commit to practicing not because it will make you feel better immediately, but because it is a wholesome thing to do? Can you show up to meditation not to achieve some special state, but simply because it is good to train your attention? Can you practice loving kindness not to fix yourself, but because all beings, including you, deserve kindness? When you focus on the process rather than demanding specific outcomes, you paradoxically create the conditions for transformation to occur naturally. Another obstacle is what Buddhism calls wrong effort, which is trying too hard or practicing with too much tension and aggression. You might approach these remedies with a harsh, militaristic attitude, forcing yourself to practice even when it is creating more suffering, punishing yourself when you don't practice perfectly. This kind of aggressive effort actually impedes healing. It is another form of violence against yourself, another way of being at war with your experience. There is a famous teaching story about a student who was practicing meditation with great intensity, sitting for many hours a day, barely sleeping, pushing himself to the point of exhaustion. His teacher watched this with concern and finally said, "Tell me, when you were a musician, what happened if you tuned the strings of your instrument too tight?" The student replied, "They would break." "And what happened if you tuned them too loose?" "They wouldn't play properly." "Just so," the teacher said. "The practice requires balance, not force, not too tight, not too loose. This is the middle way. The antidote to wrong effort is to practice with kindness and balance. Yes, show up consistently for your practice. Yes, make effort, but do so with a light touch, with compassion for yourself, with recognition that you are doing your best. If you notice you are practicing with too much tension, see if you can soften. Take a break. Be gentle with yourself. The practices will be more effective when they come from self-compassion rather than self-aggression. Another obstacle you might encounter is the activation of old trauma. Sometimes when you sit quietly with yourself, when you stop distracting and numbing, painful memories or feelings from the past arise. This is actually a natural part of the healing process. Your system is bringing up what needs to be processed and integrated, but it can be overwhelming if you don't have proper support. If you have a history of significant trauma, it is important to work with these practices under the guidance of a trained therapist who can help you process what arises safely. There is also the obstacle of comparison and competition. You might look at others who seem to be progressing faster on the spiritual path or healing more quickly from their depression. You might judge yourself as inadequate or doing it wrong, but everyone's path is unique. Comparing your insides to other people's outsides is a recipe for suffering. You don't know what others are actually experiencing internally. You only see the surface. Focus on your own practice, your own progress, your own healing. There is a teaching story about two students who started meditation practice at the same time. After a year, one student seemed to have made great progress. She was calm and peaceful, spoke eloquently about spiritual matters, and was admired by others. The other student still struggled with difficult emotions and felt like he was making no progress. He went to the teacher in despair. "Look at her progress and look at me. I am a failure." The teacher smiled. "You are comparing your beginning to her middle. You are comparing your honest struggle with her polished presentation. Keep practicing with sincerity. That is all that matters." Another obstacle is the tendency to use these teachings to judge others or to feel superior. "I practice Buddhism, so I'm more spiritually advanced than people who don't." This kind of spiritual pride is actually a sign that you have missed the point of the teachings. Buddhism is about developing humility, compassion, and wisdom, not about becoming special or superior. When you notice judgmental or superior thoughts arising, this is an opportunity to practice the remedies on these very thoughts. Can you sit with the feeling of superiority without acting on it? Can you meet it with humor and self-compassion? There is also the obstacle of expecting others to change because you are practicing. You might think, "I'm working on myself, so now my family should appreciate me more." Or, "I'm practicing loving kindness, so people should be nicer to me." But these practices are for your own transformation, not for controlling how others respond to you. While it is true that as you change, your relationships will likely shift, you cannot control or predict how others will respond. The practice is to transform your own heart and mind, regardless of external circumstances. Finally, there is the obstacle of attachment to the practices themselves. You might become so identified with being a meditator or a Buddhist practitioner that the practices become another rigid identity rather than tools for freedom. The practices are meant to liberate you, not to create a new prison of spiritual identity. Hold the practices lightly. They are boats to help you cross the river, not destinations in themselves. Now let us explore how these practices can specifically address the different dimensions of loneliness and depression. Loneliness is not a monolithic experience. There are different types of loneliness, and understanding these distinctions can help you apply the remedies more skillfully. There is social loneliness, which is the absence of a social network or community. There is emotional loneliness, which is the absence of intimate connections where you feel truly seen and understood. And there is existential loneliness, which is the fundamental sense of being separate from others and from existence itself. Social loneliness responds particularly well to the remedy of creating community. If you don't have a social network, the practice is to gradually build one through consistent, small efforts. Join a group, attend a class, volunteer, go to the same coffee shop regularly, and become a familiar face. Social connection doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen when you show up consistently and remain open to connection. Even if it feels awkward or uncomfortable at first, the practice is to keep showing up. Emotional loneliness, the sense that no one truly knows or understands you, responds to the practice of authentic communication and vulnerable sharing. This means being willing to share more than surface pleasantries with others. It means taking the risk of letting people see who you really are, including your struggles and vulnerabilities. This can be terrifying, especially if you have been hurt in the past. But intimacy requires vulnerability. You cannot be truly known while keeping all your walls up. There is a teaching story about a man who built a fortress around himself to protect against being hurt. The walls were so high and thick that no one could reach him. He congratulated himself on being safe. But over time, he realized that while no one could hurt him, no one could reach him with love either. The fortress that protected him from pain also isolated him from connection. He began the difficult work of taking down the walls, stone by stone, allowing himself to be vulnerable. Yes, he got hurt sometimes, but he also experienced love and connection in ways he never had before. Existential loneliness, the deep sense of being a separate self in a vast universe, responds particularly well to the practices of recognizing interconnection, connecting with nature, and meditation practices that reveal the constructed nature of the separate self. When you deeply see that you are not actually separate, that the boundaries between self and other are more fluid than you thought, existential loneliness begins to dissolve. You realize you are not an isolated fragment, but an expression of the whole. Depression, like loneliness, has multiple dimensions. There is the cognitive dimension, the negative thought patterns and rumination. There is the emotional dimension, the feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and despair. There is the physical dimension, the low energy, the changes in sleep and appetite. There is the social dimension, the withdrawal and isolation. And there is the spiritual dimension, the loss of meaning and purpose. The 12 remedies address all of these dimensions. The cognitive dimension of depression responds to the practice of recognizing you are not your thoughts. When you can observe depressive thinking without being consumed by it, the thoughts lose much of their power. You begin to see that thoughts are just thoughts, not facts about reality. The practice of gratitude also addresses the cognitive dimension by training your attention to notice positive aspects of experience rather than only negative ones. The emotional dimension responds to the practice of sitting with emotions without running from them and to the practice of loving kindness. When you can be with sadness and despair without adding layers of resistance and judgment, the emotions themselves become more workable. They remain painful, but they don't destroy you. And when you meet your pain with kindness rather than harshness, a healing warmth begins to permeate even the darkest emotions. The physical dimension of depression often requires medical support in addition to these spiritual practices. If you are experiencing significant changes in sleep, appetite, or energy, please consult with a healthcare provider. Meditation and other practices can support your healing, but they should not replace appropriate medical care. That said, practices like mindful breathing and connecting with nature can help regulate your nervous system and support your physical well-being alongside any medical treatment. The social dimension of depression responds to the remedies of service and community. Even when depression tells you to isolate, the practice is to reach out, to connect, to show up for others. This doesn't mean forcing yourself into overwhelming social situations. It means small, manageable steps toward connection, a text message to a friend, a brief conversation with a neighbor, attending a support group even if you don't talk much at first. The spiritual dimension of depression, the loss of meaning and purpose, responds to all of the remedies but particularly to the practices of service and gratitude. When you help others, you remember that your existence matters, that you have something to contribute. When you practice gratitude, you begin to see the preciousness and gift of life even in difficult circumstances. Meaning is not something you find, it is something you create through how you engage with life. Let us explore more deeply the relationship between these Buddhist practices and modern psychological approaches to depression. There is significant overlap between Buddhist psychology and contemporary cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and mindfulness-based interventions. Modern psychology has discovered empirically what Buddhism has known experientially for centuries, that how we relate to our thoughts and emotions is more important than the specific content of those thoughts and emotions. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches you to identify and challenge distorted thinking patterns. Buddhism teaches you to recognize that thoughts are not facts and to observe them without identification. Both approaches aim to loosen the grip of negative thinking. The difference is that CBT focuses more on changing the content of thoughts, while Buddhism focuses more on changing your relationship to thoughts themselves. Both can be valuable. Acceptance and commitment therapy teaches you to accept your internal experiences while committing to values-based action. Buddhism teaches you to be at peace with all that is while engaging in ethical conduct and service. Both approaches recognize that trying to eliminate difficult internal experiences often makes them worse, and that living well involves accepting discomfort while still taking meaningful action. Mindfulness-based interventions, which are explicitly based on Buddhist meditation practices, teach you to pay attention to the present moment with acceptance and curiosity. This is directly aligned with several of the 12 remedies: sitting with emotions, mindful breathing, taking refuge in the present moment, and recognizing you are not your thoughts. The point is that you don't have to choose between Buddhist spiritual practices and modern psychological approaches. They can work together synergistically. You might see a therapist while also practicing meditation. You might take medication while also attending a sangha. You might work with cognitive techniques while also practicing loving kindness. Use all available tools to support your healing. There is also something important to say about the role of medication in treating depression. Some spiritual communities have stigmatized the use of psychiatric medication, suggesting that if you have enough faith or practice hard enough, you shouldn't need medication. This is not only wrong, but potentially dangerous. Clinical depression often involves neurochemical imbalances that can be effectively treated with medication. Taking medication for depression is no different than taking medication for diabetes or high blood pressure. It is a medical treatment for a medical condition. The Buddha taught that he showed the path to the end of suffering, but he also taught that you should use all available skillful means to reduce suffering. If medication helps reduce your suffering, that is skillful means, you can take medication and practice Buddhism. The two are not incompatible. In fact, for many people, medication reduces symptoms enough that they can actually engage with spiritual practices. When depression is severe, it can be difficult to meditate or practice loving kindness. Medication can make these practices more accessible. The key is to approach medication mindfully, working with a competent prescriber, monitoring effects, and using medication as part of a comprehensive approach to healing that also includes therapy, lifestyle changes, spiritual practice, and social support. Medication alone is rarely sufficient for long-term healing from depression, but it can be an important component of a comprehensive treatment plan. Let us also address the question of what to do when these practices don't seem to be working. You might practice diligently for weeks or months and still feel depressed and lonely. This can be deeply discouraging. First, remember that healing is gradual and non-linear. You might be making progress in ways that are not immediately obvious to you. Keep practicing with patience. Second, consider whether you might need additional support. A therapist, a teacher, a support group, or medical treatment might be necessary. Third, investigate whether you are actually practicing or just thinking about practicing. There is a difference between intellectually understanding these teachings and actually applying them consistently. There is a teaching story about a man who was very sick and went to see a doctor. The doctor gave him a prescription. The man took the prescription home, framed it beautifully, and hung it on his wall. He looked at it every day and thought about how wonderful the medicine would be, but he never actually filled the prescription or took the medicine. Naturally, he did not get better. When he complained to the doctor that the prescription didn't work, the doctor said, "You have to actually take the medicine, not just look at the prescription." These 12 remedies are prescriptions for healing from loneliness and depression, but they only work if you actually practice them, not just read about them or think about them. This is why consistency is so important. Better to practice a little bit every day than to practice intensively for a few days and then give up. Think of these practices like brushing your teeth. You brush your teeth every day not because each individual brushing dramatically transforms your dental health, but because the cumulative effect over time keeps your teeth healthy. Spiritual practice works the same way. Let us now go deeper into the transformative potential of working with loneliness and depression as spiritual teachers. This might sound strange. How can these painful experiences be teachers? But the Buddhist path has always recognized that suffering, when met with wisdom and compassion, can be a profound catalyst for awakening. The very experiences that seem to be your enemies can become your greatest allies on the path of transformation. There is a teaching story about a warrior who was training in the martial arts. He asked his master, "Who is my greatest teacher?" The master replied, "Your opponent. The one who attacks you is the one who forces you to develop your skills, to become strong, to learn discipline and awareness. Without opponents, you would remain weak. Bow to your opponents with gratitude, for they are your secret teachers." The warrior understood. From that day forward, He approached every challenge not with resentment, but with appreciation for the opportunity to grow. Your loneliness and depression are like these opponents. They are not pleasant, they are genuinely painful. But if you meet them with the right attitude, they become teachers. Loneliness teaches you about your deep need for connection and can motivate you to build community. It teaches you about vulnerability and the courage it takes to reach out to others. It teaches you about self-reliance and the importance of being your own best friend. Depression teaches you about the nature of mind, about how thoughts and emotions arise and pass away. It teaches you humility, as you realize you cannot always control your mental states through willpower alone. It teaches you compassion, both for yourself and for the countless others who struggle with mental health challenges. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, he was asked, "Are you a god? Are you an angel? What are you?" He replied simply, "I am awake." His awakening came not despite difficulties, but through them. He spent years confronting his mind, sitting with discomfort, facing fears and desires. It was through this direct confrontation with suffering that he discovered the path to freedom. You are walking this same path. Every time you sit with loneliness instead of running from it, you are awakening. Every time you meet depression with kindness instead of judgment, you are awakening. The path of transformation has what might be called a descending phase and an ascending phase. In the descending phase, you are breaking down old patterns, old identities, old ways of being that no longer serve you. This can feel like death, like disintegration, like everything is falling apart. Depression often involves this descending phase. You are being broken down, emptied out, stripped of false securities. This is painful but necessary. You cannot become new without the old dying. In the ascending phase, you are building new patterns, discovering new capacities, creating a new relationship with yourself and life. This feels more like rebirth, like growth, like things are coming together. The practices of loving kindness, gratitude, service, and community support this ascending phase. You are building positive connections, healthy habits, wholesome mental states, but understand that both phases are necessary. You cannot skip the descent and go straight to the ascent. The breaking down and the building up are both parts of the transformative process. There is a teaching story about a caterpillar who was afraid of entering the cocoon. "I will be destroyed," the caterpillar said. "My body will dissolve. I will cease to exist." A wise butterfly overhead heard this and said, "It is true that you will dissolve, but this dissolution is not death, it is transformation. You will become something far more beautiful and free than you can currently imagine. But you must have the courage to enter the cocoon, to let yourself be unmade so you can be remade." The caterpillar gathered its courage and entered the cocoon. And in time, a butterfly emerged. Your depression might be like the cocoon. It feels like dissolution, like death. And in a sense, it is death, the death of old ways of being. But if you can surrender to the process, if you can trust that this breaking down is making space for something new, you can emerge transformed. This doesn't mean you should romanticize depression or be grateful for it in a false way. It is genuinely painful, but it can be worked with as a transformative process rather than just meaningless suffering. The key is to bring awareness and intention to your experience. Unconscious suffering is just suffering, but conscious suffering, suffering that is met with awareness and wisdom, becomes a path of transformation. When you sit with your loneliness and really feel it, really explore it, you are bringing consciousness to the experience. When you meet your depression with loving kindness, you are bringing intention to transform your relationship with it. This makes all the difference. Let us explore what it means to find meaning in suffering. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote about this extensively in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He observed that those who survived the camps were not necessarily the strongest or healthiest, but those who had a sense of meaning and purpose that helped them endure. He wrote, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning." This is aligned with Buddhist teachings about how we relate to pain. Pain is inevitable in human life. Suffering is the story we tell ourselves about pain. When pain has meaning, when it is connected to something larger than itself, it becomes more bearable. One way to find meaning in the pain of loneliness and depression is to see it as a teacher, as we have discussed. Another way is to commit to using your experience to help others. Many people who have healed from depression go on to become therapists, counselors, support group leaders, or simply friends who are able to offer deep empathy to others struggling with mental health. Your pain can become medicine for others. There is a Japanese art form called kintsugi, which involves repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the breaks, kintsugi highlights them, making them part of the beauty of the piece. The repaired pottery is considered more beautiful and valuable than it was before it broke because it has a history, because it has been through something and survived, because the scars are part of its story. Your depression and loneliness are like the breaks in the pottery. The healing process is like the gold that repairs the breaks. You will not be the same as you were before, but you can become more beautiful, more wise, more compassionate because of what you have been through. This doesn't mean you should be grateful that you are suffering or that you shouldn't seek relief. Seek relief absolutely. Use all the remedies available, but also know that nothing you experience is wasted. Everything can be composted into wisdom and compassion. This is the alchemical transformation that spiritual practice makes possible, turning the lead of suffering into the gold of wisdom. Another dimension of working with loneliness and depression as teachers is that they strip away pretense. When you are depressed, you cannot maintain the social masks and personas that you might usually hide behind. You are too tired, too raw. In a strange way, this can lead to more authentic relating. When you let people see you in your struggle, when you stop pretending to have it all together, you create the possibility for real intimacy. People can connect with your authentic humanity in a way they cannot connect with a polished persona. There is a teaching story about a spiritual teacher who was known for her perfection. She was always calm, always wise, always composed. Students admired her but felt distant from her. Then one day, she went through a difficult period and allowed her students to see her struggle. She cried in front of them. She admitted her doubts and fears. She asked for support. To her surprise, her students felt closer to her than ever before. They realized she was human like them. Her vulnerability became a teaching more powerful than all her perfect composure. This is not to say you should perform your suffering or make it into a spectacle, but there is something powerful about being honest about your struggles with safe people. It breaks the isolation that depression creates. It challenges the stigma around mental health. It gives others permission to be honest about their struggles. Your willingness to be vulnerable about your depression and loneliness might be exactly what someone else needs to feel less alone. Let us also explore the spiritual crisis that often accompanies depression. When you are depressed, you might question everything: the meaning of life, your purpose, whether you matter, whether anything matters. These are actually profound spiritual questions. Depression forces you to confront existential issues that many people avoid. Why am I here? What is the point of all this? How do I find meaning in a world filled with suffering? These are not symptoms of illness. These are deep questions that humans have always asked. Buddhism offers answers to these existential questions. The Buddha taught that life involves suffering, but that suffering has causes, and that by understanding and addressing these causes, we can find freedom. He taught that meaning is not something you find, but something you create through how you live, through ethical conduct, through practice, through service. He taught that your life matters because you are interconnected with all life, because your actions have ripples that affect others, because consciousness itself is precious and sacred. When you are in the depths of depression asking these existential questions, you are actually engaged in spiritual inquiry. The challenge is to bring wisdom to these questions rather than letting them spiral into nihilism and despair. Wisdom says, yes, life involves suffering, and yes, life is also precious. Yes, nothing lasts forever, and yes, each moment is valuable precisely because it is fleeting. Yes, you are small in the vast universe, and yes, you are an essential expression of that universe. Both can be true simultaneously. Now let us explore how these practices can help you not just survive loneliness and depression, but actually thrive and grow through the experience. There is a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth, which refers to positive changes that can occur as a result of struggling with difficult experiences. People who have been through trauma or significant challenges often report that they emerge with greater appreciation for life, deeper relationships, increased personal strength, recognition of new possibilities, and enhanced spiritual development. This same kind of growth can occur through the experience of depression and loneliness when you work with it skillfully. The greater appreciation for life comes from having been in dark places and remembering what it's like to feel nothing. When you emerge from a depressive episode, even ordinary pleasures become extraordinary. A sunny day, a good meal, a conversation with a friend, these simple experiences that you might have taken for granted become precious. You develop what the Japanese call mono no aware, a gentle sadness at the impermanence of things combined with appreciation for their fleeting beauty. Having been in darkness helps you appreciate light. The deeper relationships come from the vulnerability and authenticity that suffering requires. When you let people see you struggling, when you ask for help, when you receive support, bonds deepen. You discover who your real friends are. You learn the value of community. And you become better able to support others who are struggling because you know what it's like. Your capacity for empathy and compassion grows. You become someone others can trust with their pain because you have navigated your own. The increased personal strength comes from having survived something difficult. Each time you practice sitting with discomfort, instead of running from it, you are building psychological and spiritual muscle. Each time you choose to practice loving kindness, even when you don't feel like it, you are strengthening your capacity for self-compassion. Each time you reach out to others despite loneliness telling you to isolate, you are developing courage. You discover that you are more resilient than you thought, more capable of facing difficulty, stronger than you knew. There is a teaching story about a swordsmith who was forging a blade. He heated the metal until it glowed red, then plunged it into cold water, heated it again, hammered it, heated it again, folded it, heated it again. A student watching asked, "Why do you torture the metal so?" The swordsmith replied, "I am not torturing it. I am strengthening it. Each heating and cooling, each folding and hammering creates a blade that is flexible and strong, that can bend without breaking, that can maintain its edge through hard use. Without this process, the blade would be weak and brittle. You are like this blade. The difficulties you face are forging you into someone stronger and more resilient. The recognition of new possibilities comes from having your old life disrupted. Depression often forces you to let go of plans, expectations, and identities that were no longer serving you anyway. In the emptiness that follows, new possibilities can emerge. You might discover interests you never explored when you were caught up in the busyness of life. You might reconsider career paths, relationships, or ways of living that you had taken for granted. The breakdown can become a breakthrough if you remain open to what wants to emerge. The enhanced spiritual development comes from being forced to confront the deepest questions of existence. You cannot go through significant depression without asking yourself what really matters. This questioning can lead to profound spiritual insights. You might discover that much of what you thought was important is actually superficial. You might realize that simple presence, connection, compassion, and awareness are what truly nourish the soul. You might develop a spiritual practice that becomes a foundation for the rest of your life. All of this potential for growth does not mean that depression and loneliness are good or that you should be grateful for them in some false way. They are genuinely painful, and it is entirely appropriate to want relief and to work toward healing. But it is also true that suffering, when met with awareness and wisdom, can be transformative. You can both work to heal your depression and recognize the ways it has forced you to grow. Let us now explore how to maintain your practice during the difficult times when motivation is low. This is crucial because depression by its nature saps motivation. You know the practices would help, but you feel too tired, too hopeless, too heavy to do them. This is when you need the practices most and when they are hardest to do. How do you navigate this? First, understand that motivation follows action more often than action follows motivation. You don't need to wait until you feel motivated to practice. You practice, and then motivation sometimes arises as a result. This is counterintuitive because we usually think we need to feel like doing something before we do it. But often the doing comes first and the feeling follows. This is why the commitment to practice, regardless of how you feel, is so important. Second, make the practices as easy as possible. When you are depressed, everything feels hard, so reduce the barriers to practice. If formal meditation feels too difficult, just take 3 conscious breaths. If a full loving kindness practice feels overwhelming, just place your hand on your heart and say, "May I be kind to myself," once. If connecting with community seems impossible, send a single text message to one person. Tiny practices are still practices. They keep the connection alive and often lead naturally to more practice. There is a teaching story about a monk who was going through a very difficult time and stopped meditating. His teacher noticed and asked him about it. "I don't have the energy to meditate," the monk said. "I can barely get out of bed." The teacher said, "Then breathe in bed. You are breathing anyway. Just notice one breath. That is practice." The monk followed this advice, and noticing one breath became noticing a few breaths, which eventually led back to formal practice. But it started with the smallest possible step. Third, practice in community when possible. It is much easier to maintain practice when you are doing it with others. If you can attend a meditation group, even if you are just sitting in the room with others while they practice and you struggle, that is valuable. The energy of the group supports you, and just showing up when you don't feel like it is itself a powerful practice. Fourth, remember your why. Why did you start practicing? What drew you to these teachings? Maybe it was desperation, a sense that you couldn't go on as you were. Maybe it was hope that there was a way through the suffering. Maybe it was inspiration from a teacher or teaching. Reconnecting with your original intention can help motivate you to continue. You might write down your intention and read it when motivation is low. Fifth, celebrate small victories. When you are depressed, your mind will dismiss any progress as insignificant. But if you practiced even once this week, that matters. If you managed to reach out to one person, that is huge. If you had 5 minutes when you felt slightly less depressed, that is progress. Acknowledge and celebrate these small movements toward healing. They are the steps on the path. Sixth, have compassion for yourself when you don't practice. You will have days or weeks when you don't practice at all, when you forget everything you know, when you fall back into old patterns. This is not failure. This is part of the process. Meet these times with kindness rather than judgment. I've been lost in depression and haven't practiced. That's understandable. Can I begin again now? Always you can begin again. Every moment is a fresh start. Let us also address how these practices evolve over time. When you first encounter these teachings, you are learning the forms, the basic techniques. This is like learning the alphabet. You are just trying to understand what each practice is and how to do it. With continued practice, the techniques become more familiar. This is like learning to read. You can string the letters together into words and sentences. The practices start to feel more natural, less mechanical. With even more practice, the teachings begin to integrate into your life. This is like reading fluently without thinking about individual letters or words. The practices become part of how you live. You find yourself spontaneously practicing loving kindness when someone frustrates you. You naturally remember impermanence when you are caught in difficulty. You automatically bring awareness to your breath when you notice stress building. The practices are no longer something you do separately from life. They become woven into how you move through life. Eventually, the practices disappear into simple presence. This is like reading great literature where you forget about the words entirely and are absorbed in the story. You are no longer doing practices. You are simply being present, being kind, being aware. This is what the Zen tradition calls no practice, no attainment. You have gone beyond techniques to embody the qualities the techniques were designed to cultivate. But this takes time, often many years. Be patient with the process. There is a teaching story about a student who asked her master, "How long have you been practicing?" The master replied, 43 years. The student said, 43 years, and you still practice? When will you be finished? The master laughed. I will be finished when I die. Practice is not something you complete. It is how you live. After 43 years, I am still a beginner, still learning, still deepening. This is the joy of the path. There is always further to go, always more to discover. This might sound discouraging, the idea that you will never be done. But actually, it is liberating. You don't have to pressure yourself to reach some final state of perfection. You can relax into the ongoing process of practice, of showing up, of doing your best, of beginning again when you forget. The path itself is the goal. The practice itself is the destination. Being present to your life, with all its difficulties and joys, this is awakening. As we come toward the end of this teaching, let us return to where we began, the fog of loneliness and depression that wraps around the heart. You came to these teachings perhaps feeling isolated, perhaps feeling hopeless, perhaps feeling that the darkness would never lift. You have now received 12 remedies from the Buddhist tradition, 12 ways of working with your suffering that can transform your relationship with loneliness and depression. Let us review these remedies briefly, not just as a list, but as an integrated path. You learn to sit with your loneliness instead of running from it, to turn toward your experience with curiosity and courage. You learn to meet your pain with loving kindness, to offer yourself the compassion that you deserve. You learned to understand impermanence, to recognize that all states are temporary, including your suffering. You learn to use your breath as an anchor in difficult moments, a way of returning to the present when the mind spirals into dark stories. You learned to recognize your interconnection with all of life, to see that you are not as separate as you feel. You learned the value of serving others, even when you don't feel like it, as a way of stepping outside the prison of self-focused suffering. You learned to take refuge in the present moment, the only place where life actually happens. You learned that you are not your thoughts, that you are the awareness in which thoughts arise and pass away. You learn to practice gratitude, to train your attention to notice what is good alongside what is difficult. You learn to connect with nature, to allow the natural world to heal and restore you. You learn the importance of community, of finding or creating sangha where you can be supported and offer support, and you learn to practice patience, to accept that healing is gradual and to meet yourself with kindness throughout the process. These 12 remedies are not separate techniques but facets of a comprehensive approach to transforming suffering into wisdom. The Buddha taught that he showed one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. Everything in Buddhist teaching points toward this. The path you have been shown is a path that countless beings have walked before you. You are not alone in your struggle. You are part of a lineage of practitioners who have discovered that suffering can be transformed, that darkness can be illuminated, that the heart can heal. But understanding the path is not the same as walking it. Reading about these remedies is not the same as practicing them. This is where your commitment comes in. Will you actually practice? Will you show up day after day, even when it's difficult, even when you don't see immediate results, even when depression tells you it's pointless? This is the crucial question. The practices work, but only if you work them. There is a final teaching story to share with you. In ancient India, there was a young person who was suffering greatly from loneliness and despair. They heard about the Buddha's teachings and travelled far to meet him. When they finally arrived, they prostrated before the Buddha and said, "Please, enlightened one, save me from my suffering. Take away this pain. Fix me." The Buddha looked at them with infinite compassion and said something surprising. He said, "I cannot save you. No one can save you but yourself, but I can show you the path, I can point the way, and I can walk beside you as you journey. You must take the steps yourself." This is what is being offered to you now. Not salvation from outside, but teachings and practices that empower you to transform your own suffering. Not a magic cure, but a path that requires your commitment and effort. Not a guarantee that you will never feel pain again, but the possibility of a different relationship with pain, one characterized by wisdom and compassion rather than resistance and despair. You are being invited to take responsibility for your own healing. This is not blame. You did not cause your depression or loneliness through some moral failing, but you have the power to work with these conditions in ways that can transform them. You have the capacity to practice, to show up, to begin again, to walk the path. This capacity is your Buddha nature, your fundamental wellness that exists even in the midst of illness. The question is not whether you are broken or whether you can be fixed. You are not broken. You are a human being going through difficult experiences, as all humans do. The question is whether you will meet these experiences with wisdom or with resistance, with compassion or with judgment, with presence or with avoidance. Every moment offers this choice, and every choice matters. As you move forward from this teaching, know that you carry with you everything you need. The practices have been transmitted. The seeds have been planted. Now it is a matter of watering those seeds through repeated practice, of tending the garden of your consciousness with patience and care. Some seeds will sprout quickly, others will take time. But if you keep practicing, transformation will unfold naturally in its own time. You will have moments of profound peace and moments of deep struggle. Both are part of the path. You will have days when practice feels effortless and days when it feels impossible. Both are normal. You will have insights that clarify everything and confusions that muddy the waters. Both are opportunities for learning. The path is not a straight line from suffering to enlightenment, but a spiral that circles through both darkness and light, gradually ascending even when it seems you are going in circles. Remember that you are part of a community of practitioners, seen and unseen. All over the world, People are working with these same teachings, facing similar struggles, committing to the same practices. When you practice, you are connected to all of them. When you sit in meditation, you sit with countless others who are also sitting. When you practice loving kindness, you are sending out ripples that touch the whole web of interconnected consciousness. You are never alone in your practice, even when you practice alone. Remember also that asking for help is not weakness, but wisdom. If you need therapy, seek it. If you need medication, take it. If you need support, reach out. The Buddha himself lived in community and relied on the support of his Sangha. He taught that noble friendship is not just helpful, but essential to the path. You are not meant to do this alone. Build your support system and lean on it when you need to. Most importantly, remember to be kind to yourself. The harsh inner critic that depression amplifies is not your friend. It does not motivate you toward health. It only deepens your suffering. Every time you notice self-judgment arising, practice meeting it with the loving kindness you would offer to a dear friend who is struggling. Speak to yourself as you would speak to someone you love. You deserve this kindness, not because you have earned it through achievement, but because you are a being who experiences suffering and who deserves compassion. The path of healing is also a path of awakening. As you work with your loneliness and depression, you are not just trying to feel better, you are discovering your true nature, which is vast and luminous and fundamentally okay. You are learning to rest in awareness itself, which is never depressed even when depressive states arise within it. You are recognizing the impermanent nature of all phenomena, which liberates you from clinging and aversion. You are developing compassion, both for yourself and for all beings who struggle. This is not just personal healing, this is spiritual transformation. You are not trying to return to who you were before you became depressed. You are becoming someone new, someone who has been refined by difficulty, someone who has discovered depths of strength and compassion you did not know you possessed. The depression and loneliness, as painful as they are, can be the very catalysts for this transformation. In closing, let me offer you this blessing. May you find the courage to turn toward your suffering rather than running from it. May you discover the healing power of self-compassion. May you recognize your connection to all of life. May you find community that supports your journey. May you be patient with yourself as you walk this gradual path. May you discover that you are not broken but whole, not lost but finding your way, not alone but intimately connected to all beings. May your loneliness become a teacher of connection. May your depression become a teacher of depth, of compassion, of the preciousness of life. May these 12 remedies serve you well. May you practice them with dedication and kindness. May you discover the peace that lies at the heart of your being, the peace that was never disturbed by any passing state of mind. And when you emerge from the fog, as you will, may you turn back with compassion to extend a hand to others who are still lost in darkness. May your healing become a gift to the world. May you become a light for others, not because you never experienced darkness, but because you have learned to carry light even in dark places. The path is before you. The practices are in your hands. The community surrounds you, seen and unseen. Your Buddha nature is intact, waiting to be recognized. Everything you need is already present. Now begins the journey. Step forward with confidence. Step forward with kindness. Step forward knowing that countless beings have walked this path before you, and countless beings walk it with you now. You are not alone. You have never been alone. Loneliness is the forgetting of connection. Depression is the forgetting of your fundamental wellness. These 12 remedies are ways of remembering, of coming back to your true nature, of reconnecting with the web of life that has always held you. Walk this path with courage. Walk it with gentleness. Walk it with trust that healing is possible, that transformation is real, that peace awaits. May you be well. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. May you discover the joy that lies at the heart of being. This is the wish that the Buddhist tradition has held for all beings for thousands of years. This is the wish held for you now. May these teachings take root in your heart and flower into wisdom, compassion, and liberation. The journey continues. Each moment is a new beginning. Each breath is an opportunity to practice. Each day is a chance to begin again. Walk gently, dear friend. Walk with awareness. Walk with love. The path is long, but you are not walking it alone. And though the fog may sometimes be thick, remember that the sun is always shining above the clouds. Your true nature is like that sun, always present, always radiant, never diminished by passing weather. Go forth now with these 12 remedies as your companions on the path. Practice them, embody them, let them transform you. And know that in doing so, you are not just healing yourself, but contributing to the healing of all beings. Your liberation is not separate from the liberation of all. In the web of interconnected existence, every moment of peace you cultivate ripples out to touch the whole. Your practice matters. You matter. This moment matters. Begin now. Begin exactly where you are, with exactly what you have, with exactly who you are. That is enough. You are enough. The path is here. Walk it with your whole heart, and may you discover the freedom that awaits. This concludes the teaching on the 12 Buddhist remedies for feeling lonely or depressed. May it serve you well. May it guide you through darkness into light. May it help you remember who you truly are beneath the passing clouds of loneliness and depression. You are awareness itself, vast and luminous and free. This has always been true. This will always be true. May you rest in this knowing, now and always.